Hello there. I'm going to share some facts with you that maybe some people know, maybe they don't know. And I want to mention that my viewers are not just people from the USA, people from around the world. So there may be a lot of people that aren't aware of this information. But in 2019, the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, signed an executive order regarding the Indians because of the history of what they did to Indians in California. That he wanted to make sure that it was described in the history books that they were genocided. Okay, there's no whitewashing it, there's no diluting it, there's no sugarcoating it. That's what happened, and that's just one state. Okay, so my issue with Newsom is that he just speaks things that he thinks people want to hear, that he thinks might vote for them, because he doesn't care about so many tribes of California. And I'm going to go over the little bit, I'll just do a little synopsis, like a little cliff note history here of what happened to the indigenous people, of whom are Indians. And the reason I'm doing this video is because he has allowed many people going out there with foreign flags saying this is our land and we're taking it back. And I'm not talking about people that are upset on, the picking people up and deporting them and saying there's so many of us this undocumented, you're trying to deport us, and it's not even like they don't even represent Mexico and they don't represent Mexican people. I have family members who are half Mexican, okay, and you don't represent my family's people. You don't represent those people. People that go out there and do these things are just the way that they're doing it, and they're demanding that these businesses have been targeted for funding and fueling the cartel with evidence that our government has said that they have to go after them the way that they did. They wouldn't target a business and tell the world that they have evaded $17 million worth of taxes and committed crimes. It wasn't just the people working there and the people they were arresting. It was literally a business that they had committed federal crimes. They gave them the right to go there and arrest those people. Okay? And those businesses are going to be prosecuted. So they just covered all that up and then spread all kinds of lies. Not sure who started the lies, claiming that they went into elementary schools and, and was disturbing elementary school graduations was completely debunked by Snopes. And also their very own brief they filed today, there was not one mention of any graduations being disrupted. And that is a statement that they're just playing people's minds and emotions to get all these people out there, because truly they're dependent on so many people who are not legally here. They want their votes because, see, in local elections, there are many places that they can now vote, so like mayors, but federal elections, they do vote, and there are states who create laws that say that you can sign up and get registered to vote in a federal election for the president, right, or federal elections, right, within days of an election. And then there's a federal law that says you can't purge voters from 90 days to an election day, which creates that loophole. But the local elections, there's some places where local elections they are. So they're importing a lot of people that are dangerous. And you're harming the people that are there doing good across our nation as well. It's not just, the crime isn't just happening there, but these businesses that's funding the cartel, and then just hiding all of that in their brief and from the public. So it makes me angry because they're out there saying things like it's our land. Because Mexico ceded a lot of the land that is now known, with a few states, California being one of them. And so they're saying, look, we don't accept what the consequence of the war was, which Mexico was sold and became California. But the real problem is what happened to the Indians. If that land was stolen from anybody, it was like executive order trying to act like he respects Indian people, while you have them out there riding around wearing, waving their Mexican flag saying it's their land. How dare you? So Here we go. Short overview of the California Indian history, and I'll put a link in the description under nahc.ca.gov. So this is literally a government. You have so much, pretty much all of California was Indian. So many different tribes. Just to name a few, you have the Toloas, Shasta, Karok, Yurok, Hupa, Willakut, Cholulu, Chimariki, and Wayot tribes. Those were the distinctive northern rainforest environment, encouraged these tribes to establish their villages along the many rivers. East, you had the Modoc, the Achumawi, the Atsugui tribes. Western portion of this territory was rich in acorn and salmon. Further to the east, UK, you had grass seeds, tuber berries, rabbit, deer. Central California territory includes Bear River, Matale, Lasik, Nogada, a whole bunch of them. I'll just put the link, okay? I'm just trying to keep this brief. But the history, the Spanish entrada into the Alta California was the last great expansion of Spain's vastly overextended empire in North America. Massive. Provided the Franciscan Padres with an argument to establish missions relatively free from colonial settlers. California and its Spanish colonization would be different from earlier efforts to simultaneously introduce missionaries and colonists in the world conquest schemes organized by the driven Franciscan administrator Junipero Serra and military authorities under Gaspar de Portola. They went to San Diego in 1769. They established the first of 21 coastal missions. Okay? They were essentially coercive religious labor camps organized primarily to benefit the colonizers. They were first to militarily intimidate the local Indians with armed Spanish soldiers. Armed Spanish soldiers. Does that sound familiar? Soldiers intimidating people? They're sitting there acting like they're being intimidated by people who's trying to arrest criminals there, who's trying to feed this cartel that's hurting not only Americans and American minorities of all ethnicities, and the Native American Indians, and the Native American Mexicans, and the Mexicans. They're hurting everybody there. And I watched with my own eyes a woman come out there who's a minority, whose loved one was murdered brutally by a criminal illegal alien, and they beat her up because she spoke against them being upset about them arresting people for criminal reasons. They just assaulted her. Anyways, at the same time, the newcomers introduced domestic stock animals that gobbled up native foods, undermined free or gentle tribes' efforts to remain economically independent. Bribes, intimidation, onslaught of the European diseases, desperate parents of sick and dying children, elders, frightened the Indian families to seek assistance from the newcomers, who seemed to be immune to the horrible diseases that overwhelmed the Indians. They were authorized by the crown to convert the Indians in a 10-year period. Thereafter, they were supposed to surrender their control over the mission's livestock, fields, orchards, and buildings to the Indians, but the Padres never achieved this goal, and the lands and wealth was stolen from the Indians. The native resistance? Well, they were enslaved. Going on and on and on with the horrible abuses. I think a lot of people think that it was only white people that abused Indians and enslaved Indians and black people. You know how many tribes there are in California alone? You know how many tribes there are in America? I live in Oklahoma. My family were on the rolls centuries ago and got on the Indian rolls decades ago. My direct family, myself, and I left the troll. I left the being a member of the Indian tribe. I'm still, got my CDIB and so forth. I can partake in, I grew up going to powwows, but the hostility, the political hostility that continues against Native Americans is just, even launching tribes against tribes. Now you got in California, you're trying to basically, whether intentionally or not, pitting minorities against each other allowing Latinos to go out there and claim that this is their land, well, that's why we need to revisit history, right? Mm-mm. You don't see tribes across America and all of their descendants. Let me tell you something. There's many millions. You go read the census and they'll tell you that, the Indian numbers are so much smaller according to them because they go by tribal membership. But really and truly, there are so many millions of people who aren't able to get on the tribes because they didn't get in the census or they didn't get on the rolls back when the very small windows were open, because it was a lot of them were born in teepees where they didn't have the paperwork or they just were too afraid to. They just were too intimidated to. I've got one side of my family that, got enrolled in the tribes, and another side of my family that has more Indian blood than the other didn't. Okay? But if you were just to go by DNA, there's many millions of people in this country who are Native American, okay, by DNA, right? Indians in the Mexican Republic in 1823, the Spanish flag was replaced by that of the Mexican Republic. Little immediate change in personal Indian policy occurred. The independence government was decidedly anti-clerical, and the growing body of colonial leaders resented the monopoly of the Indian lands and the unpaid Indian labor enjoyed by the Franciscans. There was no land grants to the colonists had occurred under Spanish rule. Some 25 grazing permits or concessions had been issued to colonial citizens. This was the beginning of the dispossession of tribal lands by colonial authorities. Plantation-like missions claimed about 1/6 of the present territory of the state, but legal title to these towns were assigned to the Spanish crown. Not the white people crown. The Spanish crown. The missions were only supposed to last 10 years, after which the developed estates were to be distributed to surviving mission Indians. It was assumed the Indians would evolve into hardworking tax-paying citizens of Mexico, but the missionaries kept coming up with excuses why they should not surrender the rich pastoral and agrarian empire they had erected with the lands, resources, and hard labor of mission Indians. The Mexican Republic's 1824 Constitution declared Indians to be citizens with rights to both vote and hold public office, but despite that, they continued to be treated as slaves. So then there was a collapse of the mission system. The new government gave 51 land grants to its colonial citizens between 1824 and 1834. I think that we all kind of know the history of what happened to them. They lost the land that they stole, and they sold the land that they stole to someone else. And now they think they're going to parade around and harm our now established government to bring in many people, many people who are criminals, and then protect them. Sex traffickers, human traffickers, like what they did recently in Minnesota, Wisconsin. They literally started a riot, falsely claiming that ICE was there, falsely claiming that they were just deporting people for no reasons, and they weren't even. ICE was like a part of them assisting because they were part of, they work side to side with Department of Homeland Security, but it was DEA. It was a human trafficking sting operation. And they found victims. And they were out there to defend those people. Yeah. That's what we're dealing with in America. By lies and deception of media. Okay. I think that the media should be held accountable, and every politician held accountable who is lying to the people to incite emotional upset. Like the man who was crying because he believed that there was an elementary school graduation that had been raided, and that didn't even happen. Newsom's brief in federal court today proved that. Didn't mention anything about graduation in any school being raided. Numerous paramilitary troops established to kill Indians, kidnap their children. The Humboldt Home Guard, the Eel River Minutemen, Placer Blades, among other terrorized local Indians. The Gold Rush, the American Invasion. And anyways, Mexico lost a part of the land that they stole and brutally genocided and mistreated many tribes of Indian people. They lost what they stole. Okay? And now they think that they're going to go back to California and steal the land again. Not only from the American people, but the tribes that live there still, that they abused so many years ago. That's what Newsom has done. He has gone to these people that he has imported and allowed criminals to come in, violate the immigration laws, disrespecting the Native Americans again, and has the audacity to cover up them riding around declaring that it's their land that they're going to take again. Knowing there's Latino groups who literally preach this doctrine to this younger generation that this is their land stolen. Okay? Newsom needs to get up there. He needs to apologize to all the Native American Indians of the United States of America. He needs to say, listen, whoever's going around and saying that this is Mexico's land that was stolen from them, need to remember it was stolen first from the Indians. And if he doesn't do that, there ain't nothing real about him. Okay? Anyways, I just wanted to give a little update on what's what. Boom, boom. TNT in the house. Hope you have a blessed day.